Good morning, everyone. We're going to give it a couple of minutes for people to join. We'll get started quite soon. Hang tight. All right. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for our weekly trade and tariff briefing. I'm Jared Anderson, Senior Director of Business Advisory at World Trade Center, Utah, and I have the pleasure of facilitating today's conversation. If you're here for the first time, this weekly webinar series is intended to provide you with the latest information around trade and tariffs. You can view previous webinars on our YouTube channel and find updates to our tariff dashboard on our website, which we'll link for you in the chat. Today, we're excited to hear first from Ben Collender, Chief of Staff for the World Trade Center Utah, about updates to the World Trade Center Utah to the World Trade Center Utah tariff dashboard. We will then have the pleasure of hearing from Sean Hostetter, CRO of Dryout. Side note, one of my favorite brands in the state of Utah, about how outdoor companies are responding to tariffs and being resilient in the economy. It's all yours, Ben.
Thanks, Jared. Share my screen. All right, and as we do every week, just reminding the group that you can always access our webpage that I'm sharing here on the screen through our website, wtcutah.com/tariffs for all the latest updates on tariffs. You can also see a link to join these Friday webinars, and we've got a great panel on where to start if you're getting hit with these tariffs and not knowing what you should do and what things you should be weighing and considering. We keep a checklist here for companies to consider. Now, I'm going to go in. We don't have a ton of updates this week, which is pretty good news. We have two main tariff updates. The first is we talked last week about steel and aluminum, and that there was an open comment period for any companies wishing to have items included in the 232 steel and aluminum tariffs. That open public comment has closed. It closed on the 29th. And so as we monitor the customs messaging system about new tariffs that are implemented as a result of the open public comment period, we'll advise businesses on this webinar as we do every week. The other item is a repeated tariff. So this is a lesson for us to maybe not take things off the dashboard too early, because the film tariff had gone silent for so long, we sort of pulled it back. But it was discussed again this week that there will be 100% tariff on film coming into the United States. Now we've had and it's specifically for films produced overseas that are then sent to the United States. So there's a lot of questions surrounding how would this be implemented? What will this look like? I think those questions still remain. And, as we get clarification, again, we'll update this group on the weekly webinar. The last item, before I do it, I'd also like to keep a running list of calendar items in these webinars, because we have a lot of milestones coming up. But before that, I would like to say, a lot of buzz is going around about the government shutdown. What does this mean? How is my business impacted? There are a variety of ways businesses are likely impacted, but as it pertains to tariffs, the only thing that we're monitoring right now is that the foreign trade zone is one of the few tools that are available to avoid these tariffs in one way or another. Now, Customs and Border Protection they're in operation. They're going to be here. They're deemed essential in the government framework. However, the application intake is taken by a group in Commerce called the Foreign Trade Zones Board. And we're receiving out of offices for that group, which means new applications or modifications to applications are likely to be stalled. And it's going to be dependent on how long this government shutdown is in place. And then even when the shutdown ends and the team comes back, we anticipate a likely backlog of applications and digging out. So One of the big impacts as it pertains to tariffs is we can anticipate new applications or pending applications are going to take a little bit longer than usual. So with that, I'm going to transition quickly into significant dates to monitor that are coming up. We already mentioned the steel and aluminum tariffs that were implemented. The USMCA, this is another one that we're going to keep an eye on. It's we have open public comment until November 3rd. We also have open public comment on the inclusion process for auto and auto parts until November 3rd. The big one, the biggest consideration is the Supreme Court oral arguments on the IEEPA tariffs. That is slated for November 5th. So mark that on your calendars. And I've mentioned this to a lot of different groups, but SCOTUS Tunes is a good way to digest oral arguments by the Supreme Court. So Google it, watch it. It'll be great. Not necessarily the court decision one way or another, but at least a platform to absorb it. And then the last thing I'm going to mention is the joint review for USMCA. So the public comment is open until November 3rd, but the joint review from the US, Canada, and Mexico takes place on July 1st. The dates we don't know are additional 232s on wind turbines, semiconductors, polysilicon and its derivatives, unmanned aircrafts, jet engines, and critical minerals. So as those dates become available, we'll be sure to update this group as well. So that's it for the updates on the tariff dashboard, and happy to answer any questions that may come. Jared, I believe this is off to you.
Perfect. Thanks, Ben. I'm going to pass things over to Sean. Sean Hostetter joining us again from Dryout. Do you mind introducing yourself, Sean, and taking things over?
You bet. So I've spent my entire career, my name's Sean Hostetter again. I spent my entire career in the outdoor industry. So I ran a company called Cat North America. So with that company for 23 years based in Minneapolis. And we were one of the leading manufacturers for portable water treatment systems. We sold to REI, Bass Pro Cabela's, Sportsman's Warehouse, all the big retailers nationwide. We have brands such as Optimus, Alpine Air, Spectra Water Makers, and SteriPen. And we manufactured our products globally, and tariffs were a big deal for us, importing products from all over the world. And the last 3 years, I was with another company called Alien Gear Holsters based in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. We're mostly manufacturing in the US, but we were looking to start making some products offshore. And most recently, the last year, I'm the Chief Revenue Officer of Dryout. It's a unique company. It's a sort of a startup company, a unique technology here in Utah that removes the moisture out of the inside of sensitive equipment. Like if your laptop gets wet or phone gets wet or optics get wet or really any sensitive equipment that gets wet, we make the only product in the world really that you could put those objects into a case, bag, sleeve, and dry them out completely. So it's a new technology. We don't make products for consumers. We make products for other companies. So we're a component supply brand, sort of like Gore-Tex or Vibram, and make our products into products for other companies and in our 20 some odd factories around the world. So we carefully monitor tariffs to help those companies, those partner brands we work with, to have the best pricing that they can get globally. So, and one of the other reasons I'm here is to talk about Wasatch Outdoor Industry, a summit that we just had a week or so ago, where Ben joined us and was part of our panel, and we discussed what was happening in the world with tariffs. Tariffs are a big deal in the outdoor industry. It's one of the biggest challenges that we face. One of the common threads of that entire summit, which included 120 outdoor industry CEOs and top executives, was how we can take all the challenges we're facing and turn those into opportunities. We were really trying to move from resiliency to anti-fragility, and tariffs were a big factor. And we talked a lot about how certain brands have found ways to actually take that challenge during the time of tariffs and turn it into an opportunity and grow their business and become more profitable. So we have this Wasatch Outdoor Industry Summit every year in the fall. It's a great opportunity. We try to invite all the outdoor industry brands, CEOs, and other executives from those companies to join us. And thanks to Ben for being there. It was a really, really great experience. We discussed a lot of key topics. There was a number of people in this breakout group that we had from big brands that most people are familiar with here in the state of Utah. We talked about things like rules of origin, transshipment, the Supreme Court ruling, and how that's all going to affect us. We didn't have all the answers to everything, and I'm not the answer man for everything. Ben, I think, answered probably even more than I did. But we were certainly grateful to understand all the resources that WTC Utah provides. And it's just nice to come together as an industry and talk about what we're all doing because we can learn from each other. The brands that were there weren't competitive in nature, but even if they were, I think that it's a time right now where the outdoor industry needs to bond together, to come together, to help each other figure out how to get through this really, really challenging time with high tariffs.
And Sean, I'd like to add, just from being at the conference, one theme that we've had on this webinar in the past, and one theme that is resonating really well with businesses to be in a good headspace is, when these tariffs hit and we continually hear additional rounds, modifications, you're over here, you're over there. Sometimes this can be paralyzing. And this was so a lot of the theme of the conference in terms of turning to anti-fragility as an answer was interesting to participate in the dialogue in, because from my perspective, we always are encouraging our businesses to go on offense. And this conference really the dialogue was around that, the substance, the discussion, and where that meant that, I just wanted to bring up one case, and maybe we can have a back and forth. I know you're tracking others as well that would be valuable for this group. But, as much as you can, stay informed and make strategic decisions for your business, because, what you do is dependent on your company, your industry, and all you're trying to do as a company. Of course, you have to stay afloat, but beat your competition, right? And so that means different things in different ways. So I was actually advising companies to stay ahead at one point, because if a tariff is going to be dropping and you're anticipating, maybe it's worth considering holding your materials back. And that was one of the considerations I put in. And I think it was you, Sean, who raised, whoa, hold on. We have an example of a company that did the opposite to take over market share and just use that as a cost that they were going to eat to position themselves in the market for what's coming beyond the tariffs, right? And so everything's dependent in terms of what it means by going on offense. For what does your balance sheet look like? What are your options? What is your market share, or what are you strategically positioning for? But what I found interesting, and I'll close on this, is going on offense is totally different for each company. And it's totally catered depending on your situation, and knowing the tariff climate mixed with what your balance sheet looks like, what you could do financially, what your competition looks like, is where you're really going to move to a strategic position in a tariff climate space. John, I don't know if you want to expand on that.
Yeah, no, that was a great example. So that friend of mine, the CEO of this outdoor industry consumer electronics brand, really took advantage of, like as you said, of what was happening in the market. He actually saw with his team, they discussed it at length, what they were going to do about it, and they recognized that most brands were going to pause and were going to wait until the tariffs went down, and they knew that the pause was going to be long, and that there was going to be an impact in supply chain, and that many retailers around the country were going to not have products on the shelves. They decided to put the pedal down and proceed with purchasing, knowing that the cost was going to be pretty high to bring products in, but to flood the shelves with products. And very, very interesting. They took over about 30% market share in their category for their products, because those shelves are empty for the other brands, and the retailers got frustrated with the other brands that couldn't supply. And so they, in a large way, were eating the tariffs, knowing that down the road, maybe 6-12 months down the road, they would raise prices, to a certain extent. But in the short term, they were taking that hit on margin to gain market share. Really smart business model, and very, very successful for them. A number of other companies turned to Shift Global here in Utah, a great design firm who has boots on the ground in Vietnam and a number of other countries. Shift actually helped people transition out of China or other countries into Vietnam or countries where tariffs were lower to save cost. So yeah, there are definitely ways to proactively work against tariffs to when we see the writing on the wall, we can complain, we can get angry, we can do all these things, but the best companies out there don't waste their time doing that. They really spend their time strategizing. How are we going to take make this into a strength, and how are we going to turn this around so that it benefits our brand and our customers? It's really, really tough because prices are going to go up. I mean, even if you're going to move to a different country, they're going to go up. But there are definitely strategies that we discussed during this meeting that brands are using and learning. And the smartest brands learn quick and make quick decisions and make mistakes along the way. But regardless, don't just pause and wait and sit on the sidelines, but really take a proactive approach, like you said, Ben. Yeah, that was the whole meeting, the whole Wasatch Outdoor Industry Summit was an all-day meeting up at the National Ability Center in Park City, was all about taking all these challenges we're facing. And I think tariffs were top of mind for everybody when we're talking about challenges and turning those into opportunities. And we brought up a lot of resources during that meeting that could be used, like the rules of origin links, duty investigations links, like I said, transshipments, the shortcuts, first sale pricing, the WTC webinar, of course, this webinar that many people weren't really aware of or aren't participating regularly in. And what I loved what you provided and what you talked about, Ben, regarding Traeger. Do you want to share that example?
Yeah, I mean, part of it, Traeger's been on this webinar in the past, and many of you know Phil and Jeremy and their approach and what they're looking at. And one of the things that Traeger's been successful at is really knowing the regulations well, knowing how it's going to impact them, and knowing what to ask for in a way that resonates with the intent of what these tariffs are, but what maybe would be an unintended consequences as a trade-off, right? So the administration is, with the 232 steel and aluminum tariffs, if you're going to be tariffed on a whole item coming in that just is composed in large part by steel and aluminum, that there's a real argument to be made that it should only be the portion that comes from the country. And so they made that argument and it worked and it landed well. And where we see arguments for tariff lobbying or arguments or things to the administration is, it's typically in these little nuanced ways of the impacts that may be unintended. If there's like an industry exemption request or things like this that we see coming through, they're really not landing well, or just being like a thank you for your comments sort of approach. Whereas if it's a real consideration on the implementation of a tariff, we're seeing a lot more traction and consideration for those things coming through, especially when there's legal ambiguity and folks administering these tariffs are going to weigh, is it worth a legal battle on this versus, do we just want to implement this, not harm businesses to the full extent possible, right? Those are the things being weighed right now. So.
Yeah, and dry out, one of the big benefits we bring is exactly that. It's not just a technology, but many brands are looking for production in different places, and we've got those factories in different locations that can help bring tariffs down. I think that's a new business model that's come to life through the tariffs, for companies like Dry Out and Shift Global and other companies who are helping companies transition into different markets to find ways to reduce those tariffs. And even U.S. manufacturing. I mean, there are a number of sources of U.S. manufacturing. We have some brands who really just say it's going to be high, it's going to be higher priced, but I want to have U.S. manufactured goods to just avoid tariffs and to cut them out. But even those brands, of course, as we know, are facing supply chain issues with tariffs. They're importing supplies, parts, components from other countries, so it affects us all.
Sean, there were a couple of resources that were mentioned on our panel as well that businesses may want to know about. Shift being one. There were a couple of others, and I'm going to put you on the spot here and see if you can remember and recall some of those. I think they came from you, that businesses just should be aware of these companies, private sector companies that are helping other companies navigate these tariffs? Do you recall, want to mention those for the group as well?
Yeah, like I said, Shift Global is a or a Utah-based company here that's helping companies do manufacturing overseas and transition to different markets. There's a number of other companies like them. They're just at the Utah, since this was a Utah-focused summit, we were focusing on Utah companies. There were a couple others that were mentioned outside of Utah. And dry out, of course, we're doing that for companies that want to incorporate the dry out technology. But yeah, it's a new business model. We're starting to see that more and more. These companies have boots on the ground in those factories in those countries. So they're not just trying to connect people with the factories. They actually have resources in country to ensure the quality, to ensure that the products are designed properly. So it speeds up the timeline for brands to move out of China if that's where they need to move out of.
Right.
Hey,
We do
I have a
see it.
quick question for
Yeah.
you, Sean. And we've kind of alluded to some of this, but we're in Q4 now, and it's a really important time for brands and retailers. You brought up one experience that one brand had where they really leaned in and probably had the ability to lean in based on their margins or however they worked it out. But how are you handling conversations with your retail partners, or what are some of the best practices as you're going through, as many companies have different challenges they're going through with their supply chains? How are you handling those conversations with retailers?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I mean, some retailers certainly want to design their own brands, and we're trying to help them understand, help the big brands we work with. We don't work as much directly with retailers as we work with big key brands, and we're trying to help the big key brands fight against Amazon, the cheap products on Amazon, by having new technology, new advancements in technology incorporated in their products. Like Dry Out or Gore-Tex or Vibram or what consumers know these strong brands, component brands that fall into the bigger brands. If you don't have something unique nowadays, if your product roadmap doesn't have something unique technologies, it's going to be really, really tough to fight against Amazon and all the lowball, price folks that are out there that are doing copycats. That's a big challenge in addition to tariffs that we're all facing is just copycats and these cheap brands popping up left and right. It's tough because some of them are being made in China. Like we're all trying to we were all trying to make products in China at one point or another. So it's tough that we are competing against these copycat brands made in China.
Mhm.
So again, I think it comes back to the quality, the unique selling positions that brands have, the unique selling points that they have to bring new technologies to market and to advance through working with companies that have new technologies. So I think we're all trying to find what those new technologies are. There's a new trade show that I see many outdoor industry folks going to called Functional Fabric Fair, where we're just looking for what's new, what's hot, what's different in the market. So I see a lot more people attending trade shows like that, trying to find unique new technologies coming to market to really have a game-changing new advancement in technology to differentiate themselves.
And that's a great plug for our services because we help organize trade shows abroad for companies thinking about doing just that. We do have a question in the chat that maybe I'll just jump in and address, Jared, briefly. I know you answered it in the chat already. But with regards to the foreign trade zone, an individual asked what applications are being delayed. And just in case that was missed, I know somebody was having audio issues as well. It may have been a wider group issue. The foreign trade zone applications for new applications or ones in process, which have not yet been approved by the foreign trade zone, are the applications I was referring to that are being delayed, likely for some time as a result of the government shutdown.
Yeah, and Ben, it was really helpful for our group, for you to elaborate a little bit on what was happening with rules of origin or Supreme Court ruling. It may be helpful to touch base on those areas.
Yeah, Supreme Court ruling. The big thing is that the Supreme Court is picking up these cases. There was some speculation, oh, they may not. It's very clearly illegal what the president is doing, or that these tariffs are illegal. The Supreme Court would never pick them up. The Supreme Court is picking them up. And just to elaborate a little bit, we're oftentimes asked at World Trade Center Utah about our crystal ball and what this looks like. And while we don't say, this is going to happen and here's what it's going to look like, we can give big milestones for folks to keep an eye out on. And one of those is the November 5th date we mentioned. That oral argument for the Supreme Court is going to say a lot about where these tariffs are going to go, what they're going to look like. And so for folks to be listening to those arguments and thinking about how they may want to position as a result is really important. The other thing is midterms and reelections for Congress and how that's going to play in. We anticipate, is Congress going to, think about trade promotion authority? How palatable politically are these tariffs going to be with upcoming midterms? These are things that, we don't have any answers to, but, it's going to be key to pay attention to these things as they play out to understand what your moves might or might not be. So, and what was the rules of origin? The big thing is, and Jared's team does this in business services quite well, and we've had a lot of these discussions here at World Trade Center Utah, but rules of origin are an interesting thing to go on offense with if you're assembling goods or thinking about where assembly takes place for your product, and where and how to avoid these tariffs. So sometimes, you import your product and your blanket saying it's coming in from this location or that, and it has a higher tariff. Whereas if you really dial in on rules of origin, sometimes you can cut these tariffs down drastically. And the tricky thing about it is it's a really complex world to step into. So, every tariff type or trade deal has a different varying set of rules that are associated with it. Every product type will have a different set of rules that are specialized, but getting to understand this a little bit for your industry is going to be the wave of the future and could give you a competitive edge as it applies to reducing the price of your product. There was an example raised, Sean, I don't know if that was you, in terms of, I think it was a thermometer and a piece to it that was, because of one small piece, it made the rule of origin go back to China, right?
Right.
Do you recall this example? So there are little examples like that, okay, well, if you source that piece from somewhere else, well, you just got the rule of origin to come from that location, a lower tariff location potentially. And is that worth the cost of, 50 cents to save $5 potentially, right? So these examples came up time and time again. And also is why I asked you to come on board, is there were so many rich examples and things that came in our conversation. It'd almost be good to rehash that a bit and have a great business come in and talk about, also what Dryout's doing as it pertains to these tariffs as well.
Yeah, you're right. There's a lot. People are finding answers. I mean, we have to, right? And transshipment was another one. Did you want to talk about transshipment really quick?
Yeah, transshipment, it's more of a flag than an encouragement, but in the USMCA deals, a lot of countries or companies may have been looking at options for transshipments through Canada and Mexico to avoid some of the tariffs. Those have now been hit with a 40% penalty coming in through Canada or Mexico. So it's oftentimes going to be just something to keep an eye out for and potentially avoid that strategy as it pertains to bringing in your goods through those countries. You don't want to be hit with additional penalties you're not anticipating. So what I will say as well, and this is again a plug for WTC Utah's services, especially Jared's team, is they're monitoring this stuff and they're really getting savvy at helping to walk companies through what this looks like. So
yeah, we appreciate your services and appreciate you being at the event, Ben. It was a great discussion, and we walked away with a lot of good notes and action items, and really appreciate you being there. And yeah, I would advise companies to reach out to both you and Jared to get more insights. It was very, very helpful for people that attended that breakout session.
Great. And the conference as a whole, you guys put together some great content. And if you're attending from the outdoor industry and interested in whatever iteration next year looks like? How do businesses find out about that? Is it too early? Is it, what's you want to
Yeah,
give
we don't
some?
have a date set yet, but I think they should reach out to me for sure. There's a few other people on our group. Some people know Stu Larson, that was also on the organizing committee. Lauren Batchek. There's a number of us that are on the organizing committee that are pretty well known here in the state of Utah. But please, yeah, feel free to reach out to me. Friend me on LinkedIn, direct message me. So Sean Hostetter at Dryout. Happy to help. Happy to help and provide any insights. That's what we like to do. We're here to share what we're learning with other companies. We don't see it as competitive as much as we're all in this fight together. Let's win together.
Yeah.
Great.
Well, Ben, Sean, thank you very much. I think we're at time. You've provided a great dialogue for us today, and thank you everyone who tuned in this week. Please keep an eye out for World Trade Center Utah's communication channels and website for any additional information and updates to the tariff dashboard, along with upcoming events. If you have any follow-up questions, feel free to send them to us, which will also drop into the chat.